Hollywood's golden age sparkled on the outside, but underneath, it was a minefield. Red carpets and Oscar speeches, all for show. For every starlet on screen, there were 100 more behind closed doors, told that success came with strings attached, usually from the top brass. So here's the real question. What happened to the women who dared to say no? Stay with us, because some of the biggest legends in film paid dearly for their dignity, and Hollywood tried to erase their stories. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge didn't just break barriers, she smashed them with a smile that made history. The first black woman nominated for Best Actress, nightclub singer turned movie star, a true original. But Hollywood was never just about talent. It was about playing by the rules, and the rules were written by powerful men who expected more than a performance. Behind the velvet curtains and blinding camera lights, Dorothy was handed invitations to private dinners and business meetings that had nothing to do with scripts and everything to do with submission. Say no? The punishment was swift. One executive stripped her dream role to a cameo out of pure spite. Scripts she was promised? Gone overnight. Her reward for standing her ground wasn't just the loss of career opportunities. It was erasure. The same studios that paraded her on magazine covers quietly vanished her from the A-list when she wouldn't play along. But the cruelty didn't stop at the studio gates. Dandridge's personal life became a battleground. Every ounce of her energy spent shielding herself from exploitation. The toll was devastating. Hollywood let her die in debt and obscurity, conveniently forgetting the barriers she broke. Yet here's the real plot twist. Dorothy's courage outlasted the men who tried to silence her. Her legacy isn't a tragic footnote. It's a warning shot, echoing through the halls of an industry that still struggles to value respect over power. Elellanar Parker. Elellanar Parker was Hollywood's woman of 1,000 faces. But off-screen, she wore just one: uncompromising. You know those stories about late-night script meetings in a producer's office? Parker didn't just dodge them. She refused outright. The result? She didn't get a dramatic scandal. She got something worse. She became invisible. Imagine walking into work one day and realizing all your big projects are suddenly off the table, and nobody will tell you why. That's how Hollywood punished Parker for not playing the game. Her star power never faded in front of the camera. Critics loved her. Audiences loved her. But producers wanted obedience, not artistry. Whisper campaigns labeled her as uncooperative. Promised roles were handed to others. Marketing budgets for her films? Magically slashed. Her name became a rumor in casting meetings, spoken only as someone we almost picked. The message was clear. Dignity is dangerous, and it'll cost you your place at the table. Yet Parker never compromised, never staged a public fight, never gave the tabloid vultures a feast. She confided her frustration to friends, shouldered the unfairness with grace, and kept her private battles private. In the end, Elellanar Parker's greatest role was the one the world never saw. A woman who quietly said no to an industry built on submission, and paid for it with silence instead of scandal. Kim Novak. Kim Novak was the definition of screen siren. Platinum hair, smoky eyes, and an aura that made directors swoon. But Hollywood's power brokers weren't just interested in her on-screen magic. Under Columbia Pictures' watchful eye, Novak found herself bombarded with invitations, exclusive dinners, and after-hours meetings, all under the paper-thin excuse of business. Refusing to play the game wasn't just a career risk. It was social suicide in Tinseltown. Kim wasn't having it. She dodged the advances, kept her private life her own, and refused to be a trophy on anyone's arm. The response? Brutal and cold. Once the darling of Columbia, Novak suddenly watched her leading roles handed off to others. Her name got dragged through the rumor mill. Difficult, ungrateful, even aloof. That's Hollywood code for, she won't let us own her. The studio that once plastered her face everywhere started burying her in supporting roles and letting her contracts run out. The louder she held her ground, the more the offers dried up. Novak later said, "They never forgave me for not playing their game." She didn't name names, never staged a public scandal, and she just walked away with her head high. Sure, she lost the spotlight, but she never lost her self-respect. Decades later, Kim Novak's walk-off became legendary, a quiet rebellion that proved talent and integrity can outlast the power games. Hollywood's silent treatment couldn't erase her. It just made her myth bigger. In a town built on illusion, Novak's story is a rare dose of truth. You can keep your soul, but you'll pay for it in scripts. Linda Darnell. Linda Darnell's rise to fame had all the makings of a classic Hollywood fairy tale. Luminous beauty, undeniable talent, and a charisma that lit up every frame. But for Darnell, fame came with a catch. And that catch usually wore an expensive suit and held a powerful title. By 16, she was already facing advances from men twice her age, many with the power to make or break her career. Her mother, obsessed with stardom at any cost, signed contracts and arranged meetings that Darnell herself never agreed to, setting the stage for years of exploitation and pressure. As Linda grew up, she learned quickly that every opportunity came with a price, and sometimes that price had nothing to do with acting. Producers dangled roles like carrots, but behind every script was an unspoken demand for something extra. For years, Darnell tried to navigate the system, hoping talent alone would be enough. It wasn't. The moment she put her foot down and rejected a producer's advances, the retribution was immediate. The role she was promised disappeared. Suddenly, scripts stopped coming in. Her name faded from the shortlists, and the studio machine moved on without her. Darnell never staged a public fight or made a scandal. She simply vanished from the A-list, replaced by women who played by the unwritten rules. Her later life was marked by reflection and regret, her star power reduced to bittersweet reruns on late-night TV. She died young. Her legacy is a haunting example of what happens when an actress values self-respect over submission. Linda Darnell's story isn't just about lost opportunity. It's a Hollywood warning label. In the old studio system, dignity could cost you everything, but selling out meant losing even more. Kathy O'Donnell. Kathy O'Donnell wasn't the flashiest name on the marquee, but when she hit the screen, she left a mark. Quiet, deep, unforgettable. She was the soul of post-war classics like The Best Years of Our Lives, channeling raw emotion and vulnerability that critics raved about. But behind the scenes, O'Donnell's career was cut short by something no one wanted to talk about. She refused to play along with Hollywood's dirtiest secret. Offers for major roles came, sometimes attached to unofficial requirements for private meetings, dinners, or friendships with studio insiders. Kathy said no, again and again. She wasn't about to trade self-respect for a spot in the limelight. And that was all it took. Suddenly, her phone stopped ringing, her agent disappeared, and scripts she was perfect for landed in someone else's lap. There was no public blacklisting, no headline scandal, just a steady, chilling erasure. Hollywood didn't fire her. It just made her invisible. O'Donnell didn't launch a tabloid war or write a tell-all memoir. She faded out with quiet dignity, her resistance whispered about in private, and quickly forgotten by a business always hungry for the next compliant starlet. She died young, her talents overlooked, her films gathering dust in the archives. But if you look past the industry's amnesia, Kathy O'Donnell's story stands as a stark reminder. In old Hollywood, sometimes the boldest act was a silent refusal, and the cost was total exile. In the end, her choice was simple: keep her integrity or her career, but never both. Moren OHara. Moren OHara didn't just light up the screen, she scorched it. With her fierce Irish wit, emerald eyes, and a voice that could go toe-to-toe with John Wayne, she was Hollywood's ultimate firebrand. But Moren's stubborn integrity was both her armor and her curse. in a town run by men who expected silence, smiles, and obedience. She never played coy with producers or executives, refusing to entertain their after-hours invitations or special meetings. In one notorious episode, a studio head made an advance during what was supposed to be a routine business chat. O'Hara shut him down so fast, the story made the rounds before she even left the lot. The price for that honesty? Almost instant retaliation. The phone, once ringing nonstop, suddenly went dead. Roles promised to her disappeared, and a toxic whisper campaign branded her as difficult and unladylike. Hollywood had its ways of punishing women who didn't bend. No dramatic blowouts, just a creeping, deadly silence. Still, O'Hara refused to play the victim. She didn't retreat, didn't complain to the press, and didn't let the rumors define her. Instead, she doubled down on her talent and grit, battling for every role and refusing to compromise her self-respect, even as the industry tried to freeze her out. Over time, Maureen's resilience became her calling card. She outlasted her enemies and eventually reclaimed her place at the top, but not before paying dearly for her principles. Even decades later, she spoke openly about the price of dignity in Hollywood, reminding the world that integrity was her real legacy, not just the iconic films. Moren OHara's story is a masterclass in backbone, a lesson that sometimes the real fight happens off camera, and that some stars simply refuse to be extinguished. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake's story is pure Hollywood noir. Overnight sensation, a signature look copied by millions, and a career that soared, then crashed, almost as suddenly. Her peekaboo hairstyle made her a wartime pinup, and her femme fatale roles turned her into box office gold. But Lake was never content to just play the part of Hollywood's dream girl, especially when it meant catering to the whims of powerful men behind closed doors. She had a sharp tongue, a quick wit, and zero tolerance for studio games. When a Paramount executive invited her to a private meeting to discuss her contract, Lake saw right through it and turned him down cold. The fallout was swift and brutal. She was labeled difficult and unstable, blacklisted in the press, and smeared as uninsurable, a kiss of death for any actress. The studio pushed rumors about her mental health and professionalism, hoping to keep her in line or scare her into compliance. But Lake wouldn't budge. When pressured to fake a romance with a male co-star to kill off gossip, she flat out refused. Each act of defiance chipped away at her opportunities. Contracts were canceled, agents dropped her, scripts dried up. By her 30s, the former icon was scraping by as a cocktail waitress, her name all but erased from Hollywood's memory. Her fall from grace wasn't because of scandal or personal failing, but because she refused to play by a rigged set of rules. Veronica Lake's legend endures, not as a cautionary tale of failure, but as proof that dignity and honesty come at a price. In the end, she walked away, battered but unbroken, a living rebuke to every mogul who thought he could own her. Judy Garland. Judy Garland is one of those names that still sparkles, decades after she left the stage. With a voice that could break your heart and a smile that hid 1,000 secrets, she was Hollywood's eternal ingenue. But for Judy, the dream was always double-edged. From her earliest days, studio bosses controlled everything: her hair, her weight, her friends, even her sleep. Pills kept her thin, awake, or sedated, and every move she made was dictated by men whose only concern was profit. As Judy matured, she found herself on the receiving end of opportunities that were anything but innocent. Roles and promotions dangled as rewards for playing by their rules, both on and off the screen. When Garland finally drew a line and began to resist, the punishment was ruthless. Suddenly, she was labeled unstable, difficult, and unreliable, Hollywood code for a woman who said no to power. Roles she made famous went to others, offers dried up, and the industry's solution was simple: silence her by making her disappear. The spotlight dimmed, but Garland's refusal to participate in the game never wavered. She spent her later years fighting to reclaim her career and happiness, a battle marked by both triumphs and tragedies. Yet, through all the heartbreak, Judy Garland never fully surrendered her integrity. Her courage to finally say no cost her dearly, but it also paved the way for others who refused to be complicit in their own exploitation. In a world that wanted her to play the part of the victim, Garland wrote her own script, one where dignity, not obedience, was the real prize. Dolores Hart. Dolores Hart had it all: movie star looks, talent, and the distinction of being the woman who shared Elvis Presley's very first on-screen kiss. In late 50s, Hollywood, she was poised for superstardom, racking up leading roles and fan mail by the sackful. But as her fame grew, so did the expectations from powerful men behind the scenes. Opportunities for a young actress like Hart often came wrapped in uncomfortable offers, private meetings, dinners, and the unmistakable suggestion that her future depended on more than acting talent. Studios made it clear: success meant playing along. But Dolores Hart didn't play. The constant pressure, the thinly veiled advances, the realization that talent and hard work were never enough unless she complied, she refused to accept it. Rather than sell out her values for another blockbuster, she did something that shocked everyone. She walked away. At the height of her career, Hart turned her back on Hollywood, trading her stardom for the quiet life of a Benedictine nun. The press called it a religious awakening, a dramatic act of devotion. But the truth, later revealed by Hart herself, was much simpler. She ran not from fame, but from the price of keeping it. Dolores Hart's exit wasn't a failure. It was a masterclass in radical self-preservation. Her retreat from the toxic games of Hollywood remains legendary. She didn't leave as a victim. She left as a woman who chose her own story. In the convent, Hart found peace, purpose, and the kind of respect the studio system never offered. Her legacy? Proof that sometimes the biggest act of rebellion is simply saying, "No more," and walking out the studio gates with your soul intact. Patricia Douglas. Patricia Douglas should have been a Hollywood footnote, a teenage tap dancer with a bright smile and dreams of seeing her name in lights. But in 1937, at just 20, she was invited to what MGM called a sales convention, a party that turned out to be a booze-fueled nightmare, orchestrated for the pleasure of studio executives. Douglas was brutally assaulted, but instead of staying silent, she did the unthinkable. She pressed charges, spoke to the press, and tried to hold the most powerful men in Hollywood accountable. The fallout was radioactive. Douglas refused hush money, so MGM's fixers smeared her reputation and blacklisted her from every casting office in town. Overnight, she became persona non grata, her career destroyed before it had barely begun. No studio would touch her, and her name was erased from every call sheet. She disappeared into obscurity, working odd jobs and watching her dream evaporate, while the industry carried on as if nothing had happened. It took more than 80 years and a new era of reckoning for Douglas's story to finally get the spotlight it deserved. Her lonely stand against Hollywood's power machine wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a fuse that smoldered beneath the surface until the Me Too movement exploded. Patricia Douglas paid with her career, but her courage lit the way for future generations. She proved that integrity can echo longer than any studio lion's roar, even if the price is silence. Louise Brooks. Louise Brooks was the ultimate 1920s flapper, dark bob, eyes full of mischief, and a screen presence that turned heads across the world. Her roles in Pandora's Box and Diary of a Lost Girl made her a silent-era icon. But Hollywood was quick to remind even its brightest comet that stardom came with strings attached. Brooks was bold. She slept with whomever she chose, but she never traded sex for favors. When a Paramount executive tried to barter a contract extension for a weekend together on his yacht, she shot him down without hesitation. The response was classic studio sabotage. When Brooks refused to fly home from Berlin to dub a film after that same executive's failed advance, Paramount redubbed her voice and branded her difficult. Whispers about her spread through the industry like wildfire. By 1931, Brooks was persona non grata in Hollywood. Her career tanked. She was working for tips in nightclubs, and the offers had dried up. "I could have been a star for the price of a night," she wrote later, "but daylight matters more." In the end, Louise Brooks didn't just outlast her blacklisters. She became a legend. Her silhouette is still etched on the silver screen, proof that truth can endure even after the studio system tries to erase it. Brooks showed the world you can walk away battered but unbowed, refusing to play a game rigged against you. Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur was the kind of actress who could steal a scene with just a look, a quick wit, and a voice as sharp as a punchline. On screen, she radiated wholesome charm in Capra classics, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Off screen, she was nobody's fool. Jean knew exactly how Hollywood worked, and she refused to be anyone's after-hours entertainment. Studio boss Harry Cohn, notorious for his temper and his private visits to actresses' dressing rooms, met his match in Arthur. When Cohn's threats turned physical, she fought back the only way the system allowed. She barricaded her door and demanded an armed guard on set. Cohn wasn't used to being told no. Furious, he suspended Jean without pay and spread the word that she was difficult. That old Hollywood code for a woman who wouldn't play along. With doors slammed and projects yanked out from under her, Arthur took the boldest exit imaginable. She walked away from Hollywood at her peak, swapped movie sets for a sheep ranch, and later became a beloved teacher at Vassar. Her name might have vanished from casting lists, but her legendary Capra roles endured. Students recalled her as generous, wry, and never once willing to trade shame for a part. Hollywood erased her to prove a point. Instead, she proved that standing your ground can echo louder and longer than any blockbuster. Jean Arthur's story is a reminder. You can quit the industry, but your integrity follows you home. Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple was America's sweetheart, a child star who practically saved Hollywood's bacon during the Great Depression. She sang, she danced, she made grown men cry with joy. But underneath those curls, Shirley had nerves of steel, and she needed them. At just 12, she walked into MGM producer Arthur Freed's office and found him exposing himself. Shirley, quick-witted as ever, giggled in shock. He banished her on the spot, then spread the word she lacked grown-up charm. Not content with one humiliation, studio chief Louis B. Mayer propositioned her mother moments later. Just like that, the golden child found herself frozen out by the industry she'd once propped up. MGM dropped her after a single film, and other studios, fearful of crossing Mayer, left her contract to gather dust. Shirley could have been broken, but she pivoted. She found a second act in musicals at Fox, and when Hollywood decided she'd outgrown her cuteness, she reinvented herself as a diplomat, eventually serving as a U.S. ambassador. Hollywood punished her for a single giggle of defiance. But Shirley Temple proved that no mogul's shadow is taller than a girl who chooses sunlight. Her story is a reality check for anyone who thinks innocence was a shield in old Hollywood. In Shirley's case, bravery meant laughing in the face of power and building a legacy that outlasted every man who tried to silence her. Lena Horn. Lena Horn glided onto the MGM lot like a goddess, dazzling, defiant, and determined to rewrite the rules for black actresses. Her performance in Panama Hattie electrified audiences, but she made it clear from the jump. She'd never trade her dignity for a part. Rumor had it, a high-ranking producer invited her to a script conference after hours. Lena coolly shot him down, reminding him she only discussed music on the clock. The unspoken rules were clear. One night could vault her to the A-list, but Lena refused to play along. The cost, gradual and devastating. She turned down degrading maid roles and refused after-hours tutoring. MGM responded by cutting her scenes, loaning her out, and eventually letting her contract lapse altogether. Insiders blamed box office math, but everyone knew the truth. Lena wouldn't play ball. She was blacklisted during the Red Scare for her activism and banned by Southern theater chains for simply existing on screen. So Lena took her brilliance elsewhere, singing in Harlem nightclubs, raising money for civil rights, and turning every snub into another verse in her freedom song. She lost Hollywood, but won herself. When Lena belted out "Believe in Yourself" on Broadway decades later, the ovation thundered with the sound of respect. Her refusal to bow out quietly made her an icon, a reminder that Hollywood's power is fleeting, but a backbone lasts forever. Ginger Rogers. Ginger Rogers could outdance, outwit, and outlast just about anyone on a Hollywood set. She made magic with Fred Astaire, but off-screen, she was fighting battles with men who thought a contract included after-hours perks. As a rising star at Columbia, Ginger found herself locked in the office of studio boss Harry Cohn, who lunged at her behind closed doors. She dodged, circled his desk, found the door, and made her escape, career intact, dignity in place, but the unspoken threat hanging over her head. Cohn, insulted, vowed she'd never dance on his lot again. Ginger switched studios, soared at RKO, and became the Depression-era's dream girl. Still, whispers about her uncooperative nature trailed her. Producers with long memories and longer grudges slowed her opportunities as musicals faded. Offers shrank, paydays never matched what she truly deserved, and the price for her independence became painfully clear. Ginger never apologized and never caved. In memoirs, she made it clear, "I could have kept Columbia's spotlight for the price of a chase around Cohn's desk. Instead, I kept my self-respect." Even in tap shoes, she wasn't about to dance for anyone but herself. Rita Hworth. Rita Hworth was the face that launched 1,000 pinup posters and 1,000 daydreams in the barracks of World War II. But even Gilda wasn't safe from Hollywood's old boys club. Studio head Harry Cohn, the puppet master behind her meteoric rise, decided he wanted a private share of her off-camera as well. Rita, newly married and pregnant, said no. Cohn retaliated with surgical precision. He slashed her salary, killed her publicity, and started leaking rumors that she was washed up and temperamental. Exile was swift. Hollywood's most glamorous goddess found herself typecast, then forgotten, as the roles dried up and the tabloids mocked her every misstep. European headlines jeered when her marriage crumbled, and her health was misdiagnosed for years. Still, even as her public image faded and her real struggles began, Rita never let the industry own her. In her final days, she reminded nurses of lines from Gilda, a whisper of the power and magic that was always hers alone. Hworth's legacy, a smile that belonged to no man but herself, and proof that the price of refusal could be brutal, but never final. Peggy Ann Garner. Peggy Ann Garner was the classic Hollywood child prodigy, sweet-faced, big-eyed, and a powerhouse talent by the age of 13, when she won a special Oscar for A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. But as she grew out of childhood stardom, the tone of Hollywood's offers changed. Suddenly, those opportunities came with unspoken, sometimes explicit strings. Auditions weren't just about reading lines. They were about navigating the advances of men who thought they owned her future. When Peggy made it clear she wasn't playing, the invitations dried up overnight. Scripts stopped coming. The phone fell silent. She never made headlines for a scandal, because there wasn't one. Just a system that quietly erased anyone who refused to go along with its demands. Garner slipped into obscurity, her career cut off not by lack of talent, but by the refusal to surrender her dignity. Hollywood likes to rewrite history, but the real story is this. Peggy Ann Garner's failure was simply the price of being true to herself. Her silence on the screen is thunder in the conscience of the industry, a lasting reminder that sometimes the most powerful resistance is the one no one wants to talk about. Rosemary. Rosemary wasn't your typical starlet. She was a vaudeville legend, a Broadway powerhouse, and one of the first women to truly dominate American television. But before she was Sally Rogers on The Dick Van Dyke Show, Rosemary was tested by the Hollywood casting couch. When producer Harry Rom tried to pressure her for favors in exchange for keeping her big number in a film, she didn't just refuse, she blasted him from the stage, naming names in front of a full house. Retaliation was swift and merciless. Her songs were cut from films, and studio bosses warned TV executives that she was trouble. Rosemary vanished from the mainstream, working smoky lounges and living off her wit and courage, while lesser talents took the roles that should have been hers. But she never stopped fighting, never stopped laughing louder, and never let silence become her answer. Years later, TV brought her back, and she became a feminist icon for generations of women who'd had enough of Hollywood's games. Her legacy? 90 years in show business, and a motto she lived by: silence is consent. Laugh louder instead. That's a lesson the industry still hasn't fully learned. So, what did Hollywood's golden age really cost? For these women, everything but they never gave up what mattered most: self-respect. Their stories aren't just sad footnotes. They're battle cries for everyone who's ever refused to play by someone else's dirty rules. Which name hits you hardest, and whose story do you think deserves a movie of its own? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and share this video. Because the more we remember, the less Hollywood gets away with erasing.